So it basically comes down to the quest between power and control versus wanting, loving, and belonging. And so if we can negotiate those things, both to be able to have control over ourselves and also share power and control with the other person, we can belong together. But until people can do that, we can't belong together.
Welcome to Just Healing, where we rediscover humanity in our conversations around trauma and celebrate all the unique ways we love and heal. Hey, and welcome to this next episode of Just Healing. And I have a guest that, you've seen before, but he had to come back and talk about this amazing topic. And we just vibe so well together. It's like, why not? So we have Dr. Chris Deulen here to talk about a certain population. Chris, why don't you introduce yourself again for people who didn't see your first podcast?
My name is Dr. Christopher Deulen, and I have a PhD in clinical psychology and a master's degree in theology, and I'm interested in all kinds of different topics and different diversity topics, especially. One of my very favorite areas is treating the transgender population. And I've been in this for several years and dealing with different populations, and my views have changed over the years a little bit. And so that's where I am right now.
Well, awesome. Yeah, I remember we met in a government facility that we worked at together. And I brought you in because of this, because they were like off the hook. Like, where was like, what is going on? Why is this so weird to you? Like, and I remember you had such a different perspective on it. And I want you to share, like, how it's changed and evolved.
Well, one of the things that happened to me early on in my career is I treated a transgender woman. She was a trans woman, and I didn't realize she was a trans woman to begin with. I had to evaluate her for suicide watch. And so I didn't find out till afterwards she was a trans woman. One of the doctors commented, the most beautiful woman here in the facility is a man. And so it was difficult for them to wrap their heads around that there was this very attractive trans woman, and they didn't know how to be able to deal with it. And I had to be able to start to help them understand you have to just simply see the world through their perspective, that they were assigned a certain sex at birth, but they see themselves in this way. And so if you simply think about in those terms, you won't have too much difficulty with it. Instead of getting caught up on the problem with the body, which the body is the problem to begin with, where the person feels like that they are put in the wrong body. And now they have to deal with that transitioning, if they can transition, and all the other things that go on with being discriminated against in society, etc.
Right. And I remember you said something to me that was really helped me help people get it, right, at that time. And because they kept saying, well, they have a mental disorder. And you're like, it's not a mental disorder. Like, it doesn't even really belong in the book. Like, and you're like, being gay used to be in the DSM, which is what we used to diagnose. This needs to progress. If you look at it as this person is just like you and me, and for some reason, something happened and they just don't look like how they feel. It's really that simple.
Exactly. And if you can treat them with respect and treat them the way that they want to be called, for instance, they may have a particular name they like to be called.
Right.
When I come across transgender people in my work now, I always ask them to begin with, how do you want to be referred to? Right. And they are more than willing to let us know what they, how they see themselves, and if we're willing to listen to them and really affirm them in that.
Right. And if you don't know, use they. It's a lot easier, and you can't be really offensive, right? But there's a lot of things that people don't quite understand. Like, they come to us as psychologists and they want us to give them some great profound thing. But I think our cultural climate right now has shaped this issue that was I thought we were progressing. I thought people were understanding it. I really believed in it. And now I feel like we've exploded.
I think that the sticking point became in trans sports, especially with trans women in sports, right? Which again, the body is the problem. There's no outcry in trans men's sports because, and I even have a quote from a guy, he's a trans man, who says this: There's less dialogue and focus surrounding trans men in sports. Trans men, after all, pose a lesser threat in men's sports. It's more difficult for people born female at birth to keep up with male born athletes, right? I think that it's okay to have boundaries, to be very supportive. I'm still very supportive of the trans movement. So I think it's okay to be able to be supportive of transgender rights, but also have boundaries. I can still see it from both sides and I can still try to meet that person where they are. But when it comes to competition, physical competition, the body is the problem.
Hmm. It, yeah, and but as people get older, things also change. I also think that kids are very impressionable, right? And I'm not saying that people who are transgendered, shouldn't be around children. Please do not interpret it that way in any way. I think they should be. I think kids should be exposed to every part of diversity that there is, right? And it just makes me happy when that happens. I think that when they're younger and kids are growing, that we shouldn't input our belief system on them. They need to be able to choose what they want and who they are.
Right, right. And we have to be, and this is when it comes to professionals as psychologists, right? And mental health professionals, we're going to be evaluating kids for things like hormone therapy, for things like even surgeries. The Osteopath World Professional Association for Transgender Health recently lowered their standard for like possible surgeries to the age of 15.
Hmm.
And I think we have to be very, very careful about that. I'm not saying not to give that a gender affirming care. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, though, is, and I'm going to tell you a story about what I really kind of threw me off. I have a very good colleague who's a social worker, excellent therapist, and he was approached by an insurance company to do some of these WPATH types of evaluations and to see them for therapy to make sure they're mature enough whatsoever. And so he did. In two of the cases, because he gave them very good informed consent and gave them things to think about, in two out of the 8 cases he got, they changed their mind. And then he gets a phone call from the insurance, the person who referred them, and says, "Why did you talk them out of it?" And he was like, "Well, first of all, I didn't talk them out of it. I gave them informed consent and I let them know what the possible ramifications were. And why wouldn't you want me to do that?" This is where I think a movement can take so much hold. Like, kids are impressionable.
Hmm.
And if a person truly is transgender, I can see giving them that care. But I think there's a lot of kids that are also questioning. I think as mental health professionals, we have to be very strict in our evaluations and be very clear that this person truly is this way and not have the regret later on. Does that make
Right.
sense?
No, it makes complete sense. And I was watching a movie. I think it's with Justin Timberlake. I haven't seen the whole thing yet, but I'm watching pieces. I get little awards when I finish an evaluation. I get to watch 15 minutes. Like, I'm on a behavior plan. Okay. But anyways, I was watching this movie, and his son, well, he hasn't ascribed, so I would say they, right? But they wanted to wear a princess outfit, right? And he's like, "That's for girls, you're a boy." And he buys it for him anyway, right? But then he comes home and he's crying in another scene, and he finds out that one of his friends beat him up, like an adult male, right? And I'm like, see, what role modeling is that, right? You're an adult, you know the ramifications. Kids are learning from you. That's why he's crying, right? But you need to let him explore, even if that's him, because the more you say no, you can't do it, the more the kid's gonna run towards it when
Bingo.
maybe he was just trying to figure it out, and that's okay either way.
I have a grandchild who is non-binary.
Mhm.
They were born female, but they see themselves as neither male or female. And I try to respect that by using the pronoun they or them.
Mhm.
I occasionally slip up and say she.
'Cause it's visual. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that that's part of the problem people have is they don't know how the verbiage, they don't know how to say, how to classify things very well. I think you'd be just as respectful as possible. I love my grandchild and I want to support them and who they want to be, right?
Mhm.
And they'll figure it out, I think, if we provide them that support as well.
Right. And you have to be able to do that. And, all of these, there's lots of programs and things being taken away, and it's breaking my heart. Like, I literally cried. I literally started crying when the whole military thing came out. little while back. I also started crying when they started, changing things about the transgender hotlines and being able to call in. And I'm just like, okay, but these are issues that lots of people have regardless of who you are. And now you're taking away that. What's the next thing you're going to do?
Well, this is again back to what we were talking about earlier too. This is also a backlash, I think, allowing trans females to participate with cisgender females. I think that this is where the backlash started happening, and half of the country said no more, this is too much. And now comes the consequences of things shutting down, etc. And I'm in the middle of that storm. I'm sure people seeing this the podcasts are going to criticize me for some of these things that I'm saying. I get that. But I
Let
still
them.
support the movement. It just has to be reasonable and fair and realize the body is the problem.
Hmm.
And if they could resolve that, and even my grandchild, we've had a discussion about that, and they feel like, yeah, that is kind of a problem, you know? It is kind of a problem. But what do we do? Can they just have to compete with themselves? Well, that might be the answer. I don't know. I'm not saying not to be able to compete, but to have a level playing field. Because, like I said, there's no outcry in male sports.
There's lots of barriers to that, but I mean, how do we as people, like, we're having a conversation, and even if we didn't agree, we're able to talk about it, right? What do you think the barriers are for people to be able to have some sort of understanding of this?
First of all, the first barrier is ignorance, which is almost always the first barrier of
Mhm.
anything. It's ignorance,
Yeah.
is not understanding and not having the willingness to try to understand a transgender individual. One of the things I think I've been very successful in working with transgender population is they sense that I respect them and want to understand them and see the world from their perspective. So you have to have the desire to want to be able to understand. And when you start to do that, then you can then have a happy meeting ground between, and then you have a share of information and flow. And like I said, I'm willing to be stand in the middle of things and sometimes be criticized to not agree with this group or not agree with that group, but to be able to still affirm the population and also have boundaries when it needs to happen, right? So people have got to become more reasonable and willingness to understand each other rather than judging each other or just rejecting it out of hand. But unfortunately, our education system is being dismantled, so people are not going to be as educated as they were before.
My God, don't start me down that trail. But yeah, I just can't. But, taking it back to, like, the prison system and just looking at it, right? Because it's a microcosm of the real world, right? People don't realize that. And there's a whole nother set of rules that go with that system, right? But if you can make it click in that system, you can usually make it click in society. People don't realize that because it's just a smaller version. And how have you, like, been able to reach across both sides? Because you're very good at doing that. Like, and I know because you can get free gender assignment surgery in there, and people do not agree. I mean, remember there was a person who didn't want to do it, didn't want to sign the paperwork for this person, and this person was already on hormone therapy, had already been through the counseling. So how do you navigate through that? Because I think it'll help people.
I with whatever group I'm working with, I try to see their perspective as
Mhm.
well. I try to accept it and utilize it. So if I can get buy-in, I mean, from these two divergent groups, for instance, I try to let them feel heard, each one. And then when I can do that, then sometimes I can tie the information in together to make a better decision for people. And to be that bridge of understanding, to be that I kind of educate both sides as best I can, and they sense that I'm trying to listen to them. I'm trying to understand their perspective. I'm trying to respect them. And that's really the key point. When you're trying to get people to do it, you have to come at them with a sense of respect and understanding instead of being judgmental in your attitude towards them.
Right. And there's tolerance. That word people don't understand. There's a museum of tolerance, and people are like, they think that word is so negative, and it's not. It's not negative. Tolerance to me implies, hey, I may not agree with you, but I am going to have tolerance to listen to you. I'm going to stand here and be steadfast. I am going to try to understand your point of view, right? Because you're different. You cannot change you were born that way. It's not your fault. You are. And it doesn't matter what I've been bred to believe, we are gonna have tolerance of each other, you
Right.
know?
And hopefully tolerance can can go even a step up to respect, to truly respecting and understanding rather than being judgmental of each other. That's my whole philosophy when I'm dealing with people. I really try not to judge them. I try to understand them, and I try to get them to understand me as well, right?
Mhm.
And we don't always have to agree, but we can respect one another. And when you have that respect in the invisible process, people sense that about you and they're more willing to work with you. But when you have an attitude like, I already know it and I don't want anything to do with it, you're not going to get anywhere when that happens, right?
No, no, it shuts people down, right? It's like when you're talking to a wall, you know? I love my kids, when your kid is shut down and they're just, like, done with you, right? And it's like, "Why do you keep talking?" I always think, "Why am I talking? I'm talking to myself. Walk away. Walk away." And what happens when you talk to someone who doesn't quite get you, right?
My son Christopher was 11. I was talking to him, I was lecturing about something. He starts doing this.
God.
And I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, I'm bored, Daddy. I'm bored.
That's the truth. That's the truth. He's bored. He doesn't get it. His mind has had enough, right? And sometimes people's capacity for understanding is at their saturation point, right?
Yeah, especially with the whole pronouns issue. That's really hard for people to follow the pronouns.
Yeah.
How do you want to be referred to? And so they have to be educated a little bit in their families to be able to, use them and they rather than necessarily he or she kind of thing, right? There's a vocabulary that goes along with this whole movement thing, and it changes from time to time as well.
Does.
Like the word queer, for instance. When I was growing up, the word queer was a derogatory term
Yes.
for homosexuals.
Yes.
But now the movement has taken that word and it's a kind of an umbrella for basically being non-heterosexual.
Right.
Anything that's non-heterosexual within the LGBTQ plus community is considered to be like queer, right? So the vocabulary changes as well. And that's difficult, I think, again, for the general population, for people to be able to keep up with it, which is part of the backlash for people because they don't understand it and they haven't taken the time to truly try to understand it very well.
Right, and when you don't know, I mean, I've never had somebody be offended by me asking because I'm an intelligence shows that you're willing to learn, right? And so asking is one of those things. You said ignorant. Most people don't realize that word doesn't mean stupid, right? Because you are born with a certain amount of intelligence and you're not going to really get above or below that. You're born with a certain type of smarts, right? But ignorance means you've never been taught. That is very different because you can be taught lots of things and understand lots of things, but if you haven't been exposed, then you're ignorant. That's different than
Bingo.
being smart or dumb. And people mix those things up. You can be smart or dumb and still be ignorant.
Right. Right. Unfortunately, because I was harking back to the joke about education being slashed, people
Yeah.
are oftentimes are not getting the education that they need and giving only propaganda or a certain point of view. You got to be open to different kinds of view. That's why I'm willing to be controversial. So I'm willing to say, I really support the movement on this side. I have these reservations on this side. And it's okay to be able to do that. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It has to be, I think we have to be able to think. We have to do critical thinking, which I think we've lost a lot of critical thinking at times to try to understand situations.
Right, and be able to work through it, right? Because you can have a different point of view. People don't realize, like, I've been plopped in this world, in this part of my world, with my parents who influenced me, with how I was raised, and all of those things, right? And so I have a different perspective because of my life and world experience, right? Where you have a different perspective because of your life and world experience. It doesn't make
Exactly.
us wrong, it makes us different, right?
Human beings, here's the formula for human conflict, okay? Human beings are controlling by nature.
Yes.
We're self-centered by nature perceptually. We see things from our own perspective. And this sets up attribution bias or human judgmentalness because I think I'm right and I'm going to control the situation. Thirdly, people want to belong together. We are wired as a species to want to belong together. And then fourthly, there's an invisible process that's going on between us that people are just not aware of and how we communicate through gestures, through tone, et cetera, et cetera. So it basically comes down to the quest between power and control versus wanting, loving, and belonging. And so if we can negotiate those things, both to be able to have control over ourselves and also share power and control with the other person, we can belong together. But until people can do that, we can't belong together.
Right. It's that push-pull, right? And being able to let go of this much of control is really, really hard for people. Like, I mean, oh my
Yes.
god.
They're afraid of losing power and control in that moment. But then that also, by when too many people focus on the me, power and control, we sacrifice the we, the love and the belonging, right? And that to me has to be in balance. And I mean, truly in balance. You can't just sacrifice all of you. If you're too much into the we and there's no you in that whole equation, it's not a real relationship.
No, there's not a real relationship, and you have to be able to be different with each other, right? I mean, I remember we were working at that place, and that hostile takeover came over, right? And I was like, I have to let him know that our relationship's different from this. Like, this is this place, right? And I remember telling you that, and I'm like, this has nothing to do with us. Where are we? Like, like, this is just crazy. And
Right.
you just looked at me like, she can cipher that out. I'm like, "Oh, yeah."
Very much so.
Yeah.
So I think, the whole transgender thing is really a microcosm of what our society is going through right now in terms of struggle, in terms of trying to find its way, right? And we have to be able to find those boundaries, set those boundaries, and at the same time have understanding and be supportive of it at the same time. And like I said, I'm willing to take the heat if, people don't agree with me. That's okay. I'm going to be in the midst of it. I'm okay to be wrong. I'm okay to have a dialogue about it. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to understand, etc. I'm not going to be perfect in that process, and neither are you. Nobody is going to be completely perfect in that process, right? But I think that's where we have to do.
And being wrong, being able to be wrong, that is something people struggle with. And, I've struggled with it. And now I'm at a point where I can say, "Okay, oh, I'm sorry." Because if I'm wrong, then I wanna learn. And that's the difference. Being wrong means you learn
Bingo.
something. That's
Bingo.
what makes you smarter. That's what makes you more intelligent and less ignorant.
And there are times when it's good to be wrong. There's
Yeah.
at times when you think something bad's going to happen or something, is going to be a certain outcome, and it surprises you and it isn't that way. And you say, well, thank God I'm wrong about that. It's
God,
okay to be wrong. And in
yeah.
fact, to be wrong, to be able to take responsibility for being wrong only increases your stock with other people because then they can trust you. They can realize this person can admit that they're wrong. So that shows that you can share power and control in your relationships.
And it's more of a give and take, and it's more of building a relationship, a long-term relationship, I mean, that's one thing that I've learned is that when you're able to come back after conflict and talk to somebody, you build long-term relationships. Because people always ask me, "How come you know people for, like, 30 years?" I said, "Because I'm willing to be wrong. I am willing to say I'm sorry. I am willing to understand their point of view, even if I don't agree."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We can only stand on our own truth, but that truth needs to be based on our own educating ourselves of the situation.
It and what are some other things that we can give people? Because we are almost out of time, believe it or not.
I just think that the best thing to give people is education. We can only meet one person at a time. I try to educate people one person at a time and get them to see a different perspective while honoring their perspective as well. I think that's what we have to do. We have to meet people one person at a time.
I do, and understand that they are unique to that interaction as everybody else and not lump them in. You know what I mean? That's how you really shine light. Like I always say, give people the love of Christ or give people light. You can't do that if you're judging from get jumpstart, you know?
We have to change our attitudes about that.
Yeah. And how people get a hold of you, is it the same, Dr. Du?
Yes, the same as before.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming back. Do you have any final words for us?
I just love you. I love your program. I love Jordan.
Thank you so much. And we will wrap up this episode of Just Healing.